Hi. Welcome back to another episode of Horror Talker. Thank you so much for the love you are giving to this channel. It really is very motivating. In today's episode, we have a set of true stories which left these late-night driving buddies questioning their existence. Let's listen to what they have to share. I never thought a late-night drive with friends would lead to one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. It was a clear summer night in the heart of the American Midwest, and a group of us decided to take a road trip to a remote cabin nestled deep in the wilderness of Montana. We were confident that with our trusty GPS, we'd reach our destination without a hitch. My buddies, Mike, Sarah, and Jake, were all in high spirits as we set out on the journey. Laughter and excitement filled the car as we cruised along the winding highways, the glow of the dashboard illuminating our eager faces. The digital voice of the GPS, our guiding companion, assured us that we were on the right path. But that assurance quickly faded into uncertainty as the GPS suddenly malfunctioned. The screen glitched, and the once familiar voice became a garbled mess. Panic washed over us as the road ahead veered off into an unmarked, winding trail through a dense forest. Guys, I think we're on the wrong road," I stammered, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. "Relax, it's probably just a glitch," Mike reassured us, his voice tinged with unease. We continued down the ominous road, hoping that we'd soon reconnect with a familiar route. However, the forest closed in around us, the towering trees casting eerie shadows in the moonlight. The road seemed to stretch endlessly, twisting and turning as if leading us deeper into an abyss. That's when the first strange occurrence happened. Disembodied voices crackled through the car's radio. It started as a faint whisper, barely audible over the static, but it soon grew clearer. Words emerged from the chaos, words that sounded like warnings, telling us to turn back, to find our way out before it was too late. "Did anyone else hear that?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide with fear. We all nodded, our expressions mirroring the growing unease in the car. We tried to ignore the voices, convincing ourselves that it was just a radio glitch, but deep down, we knew something was terribly wrong. As we continued along the winding road, shadows danced at the edge of our vision, figures that seemed to dart between the trees. We couldn't make out any distinct features, just fleeting glimpses of darkness. "Are those people?" Jake asked, his voice trembling. I slowed the car to a crawl, and we peered into the woods, our hearts pounding in our chests. The figures remained elusive, always just out of reach, and our attempts to communicate with them were met with eerie silence. Desperation clawed at us as the night wore on, and the road showed no signs of leading us back to civilization. We took random turns, hoping to stumble upon a familiar landmark or a road sign, but it was as if we were trapped in a never-ending maze. The disembodied voices on the radio grew louder and more insistent, pleading with us to turn back, to escape while we still could. Panic welled up inside us, and we were torn between heeding the warnings and pushing forward in search of an exit. Hours passed, or perhaps it was days. Time seemed to lose all meaning on that forsaken road. Our car's fuel gauge teetered dangerously close to empty, and exhaustion gnawed at us. The forest closed in around us, and the road became narrower and more treacherous with each passing mile. That's when we encountered the first detour sign. It pointed to a narrow dirt path that veered off from the already narrow road, leading deeper into the heart of the forest. The GPS, still malfunctioning, displayed no alternative routes. Reluctantly, I followed the detour sign, our path now illuminated solely by the car's headlights. As we ventured deeper into the wilderness, the sense of isolation and dread grew stronger. The forest seemed to come alive around us, the rustling leaves and chirping insects creating an eerie symphony of sound. And then, we saw it, a dilapidated cabin hidden among the trees. It stood alone, a haunting silhouette in the darkness. The sight sent chills down our spines, and we knew we had to investigate. We cautiously approached the cabin, our flashlights cutting through the impenetrable blackness. The door creaked open, revealing a scene of utter devastation inside. Furniture lay in disarray, walls were covered in strange symbols, and an overwhelming sense of malevolence hung in the air. As we explored further, we discovered a journal with entries detailing the cabin's tragic history, a place cursed by a vengeful spirit, where travelers like us had become lost and never returned. The entries spoke of unexplainable phenomena, of voices in the night, and of shadowy figures haunting the forest. Panic set in once again, and we realized we needed to leave the cabin and escape this nightmarish road. But as we made our way back to the car, we were met with an unsettling sight. The path we had taken to reach the cabin had vanished. The detour sign had disappeared, leaving us stranded in the heart of the forest. Desperation turned to terror as we realized we were truly trapped. The disembodied voices on the radio grew louder, their warnings now laced with a sense of impending doom. We had no choice but to continue down the winding road, hoping against hope that it would eventually lead us to safety. Hours turned into days, and our supplies dwindled. Exhaustion and fear gnawed at us, and the unending darkness of the forest became a relentless torment. The car showed no signs of slowing down, and the road showed no mercy. As we pressed on, a glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon. A faint glow in the distance, like the first light of dawn, pierced through the trees. We accelerated toward it, the car's engine roaring with newfound energy. Finally, we burst through the tree line and onto an open road. Civilization lay ahead, and a gas station loomed in the distance. We pulled in, our hearts pounding with relief. It was as if the nightmare had finally come to an end. But as we stepped out of the car, a chill ran down my spine. The gas station appeared empty, and a feeling of unease settled over us. The radio, once again functional, crackled to life with the same disembodied voices, this time warning us to leave the gas station, to escape while we still could. Fear gripped us once more, and we scrambled back into the car, peeling out of the gas station with tires screeching. We drove until we reached a busy highway, our escape from that nightmarish road finally realized. To this day, we have no explanation for what happened on that remote, winding road in the heart of Montana. We never spoke of it again, but the memory of that terrifying journey still haunts our dreams, a reminder that there are places in this world where the line between reality and nightmare becomes dangerously thin. It was supposed to be a simple road trip with friends, a journey to our favorite camping spot nestled deep in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. Mike, Sarah, Jake, and I had done this trip countless times before, but on this particular night, we decided to take a shortcut through an unfamiliar stretch of forested highway. Little did we know that this detour would lead us into the heart of a terrifying nightmare. The sun had long set when we made the fateful decision to take the shortcut. We were eager to reach our campsite and enjoy a long weekend away from the hustle and bustle of city life. The GPS had suggested a quicker route through the dense woods, and in our excitement, we unanimously agreed to follow it. The unpaved road was narrow and winding, shrouded in darkness as the towering trees formed a thick canopy above us. The headlights of our car cut through the inky blackness, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance and sway in the corners of our vision. As we ventured deeper into the forest, the atmosphere grew more oppressive. The air felt heavy with an unspoken tension, and the silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustling leaves and distant hoot of an owl. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Then, just as unease began to settle in, we saw him, an unexpected hitchhiker standing on the roadside, his figure a mere shadow in the dim glow of our headlights. I slowed the car to a stop, my heart pounding in my chest as we exchanged uneasy glances. Should we pick him up? Jake asked, his voice wavering. Mike leaned forward, peering at the hitchhiker through the windshield. I don't know, guys. Something feels off about this. But Sarah, ever the compassionate one, urged us to help the stranger. He might be in trouble. We can't just leave him here. With a reluctant nod, I rolled down the window, and the hitchhiker approached. He was dressed in tattered clothes, his face hidden beneath a mop of disheveled hair. His eyes, though, were piercing and intense, like they held a secret too dark to share. "Need a lift?" I asked, my voice trembling. The hitchhiker didn't respond. Instead, he climbed into the back seat without a word, his presence sending shivers down our spines. The tension in the car grew palpable as we continued down the winding road, the hitchhiker's silence weighing on us like an ominous cloud. Minutes turned into hours, and the forest seemed to stretch endlessly around us. We tried to make small talk to break the silence, but the hitchhiker remained unresponsive, his gaze fixed on some unseen point in the distance. Uneasiness gnawed at us, and we were eager to reach our campsite and bid farewell to our enigmatic passenger. But the forest had other plans. As we continued along the winding road, eerie figures began to emerge from the darkness. Shadows darted between the trees, their movements barely perceptible but undeniably there. We exchanged nervous glances, the unease in the car now reaching a fever pitch. "What the hell is going on?" Mike muttered, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. I had no answers, and the feeling of being watched intensified with each passing mile. The unsettling occurrences didn't stop there. Strange messages appeared on the forest floor, cryptic symbols etched into the dirt, as if the very ground itself was trying to communicate with us. "Stop the car," Jake said suddenly, his voice urgent. I hit the brakes, and we skidded to a halt. Jake pointed out the window, his face pale with terror. In the moonlight, we could see a message spelled out with rocks on the forest floor: "Leave now." Panic surged through us, and without hesitation, I turned the car around and sped back the way we had come. The hitchhiker remained in the back seat, still silent, but his presence seemed even more foreboding now. As we retraced our path, the forest seemed to close in around us, the trees reaching out with gnarled branches like skeletal fingers. The figures in the darkness grew more numerous, their forms becoming clearer as they flitted between the trees. Their eyes gleamed with an unsettling, otherworldly light. "We have to get out of here," Sarah whispered, her voice quivering. I nodded in agreement, my heart pounding in my chest as I pushed the car to its limits. The forest, however, had other plans. The winding road seemed to stretch endlessly, leading us in circles as if it had a mind of its own. Desperation set in as we realized we were trapped, our escape route constantly shifting and changing. The hitchhiker remained silent, his presence an ever-present reminder of the nightmare we found ourselves in. As hours stretched into what felt like an eternal night, desperation clung to us like a suffocating shroud. Our supplies had dwindled to a mere trickle, water bottles drained, snacks reduced to crumbs, and the fuel gauge teetered precariously close to empty. We were running on fumes, both in terms of gasoline and hope. The figures in the forest, which had once been mere shadows, now grew bolder and more brazen. They no longer flitted through the trees, but instead, they stood at the edge of the road, their eyes gleaming with an unsettling malevolence. It was as if they were herding us deeper into their dark realm, closing in from all sides. Their movements were unpredictable, erratic, and increasingly menacing. They seemed to taunt us, mock us, as if reveling in our fear and confusion. Whispers drifted on the wind, echoing through the trees, though we could never discern the words, only the chilling tone of maleficent intent. "Is this some sick joke?" Mike muttered, his voice strained with exhaustion. "A prank or something?" But deep down, we knew this was no prank. It was as if the forest itself had become sentient, a malevolent force that reveled in our torment. It wanted us to know we were trapped, that there was no escape from the horrors that lurked within its shadowy depths. Finally, as exhaustion threatened to overtake us, we stumbled upon a clearing in the forest. The moonlight bathed the area in an eerie glow, revealing an ancient, overgrown stone circle at the center. Without hesitation, I drove the car into the clearing, and the moment the tires crossed the threshold of the circle, the forest seemed to recoil. The figures melted back into the shadows, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. We continued driving until we reached a nearby town, our relief palpable. The hitchhiker had disappeared as mysteriously as he had arrived, leaving us with more questions than answers. We never spoke of that night again, but the memory of our journey through that sinister forest still haunts us. To this day, I can't help but wonder what malevolent force had led us astray, and what dark secrets lay hidden within the heart of those woods. I'll never forget that fateful summer night when my friends and I embarked on a late-night road trip through the desolate backroads of Texas. It was meant to be a carefree adventure, a break from the monotony of our daily lives, but it quickly devolved into a nightmare beyond our wildest imagination. My companions were Sarah, Jake, and Mike. We had been friends since childhood, bound together by a shared love for the open road and the thrill of the unknown. On that moonlit night, we piled into my old pickup truck, its vintage radio crackling to life as I turned the key in the ignition. The desert landscape stretched out before us, bathed in the soft glow of the moon. The radio, an ancient relic from the past, played old tunes from a bygone era. As the wind rustled through the open windows, we laughed, reminisced about old times, and shared stories from our youth. It was during one of our conversations that the radio first spoke to us, an eerie, disembodied voice that seemed to materialize from the static. At first, we dismissed it as interference, a hiccup in the aging device. But then the voice grew clearer, its words unmistakable. "Welcome, travelers," it said, sending shivers down our spines. "You've entered the realm of fate, and your journey has only just begun." We exchanged uneasy glances, wondering if one of us had played a prank. The voice, however, continued, revealing chilling details about our lives that no one else could have known. It spoke of past accidents, personal secrets, and even our innermost fears. "You, Sarah," the voice intoned, "fear the darkness, but tonight, it will be your closest companion." Sarah's face drained of color as she clutched the edge of her seat. I could see the fear in her eyes, mirrored by the rest of us. It was as if the voice had glimpsed into our souls, revealing our deepest vulnerabilities. "We have to turn this thing off," Jake stammered, his fingers trembling as he reached for the radio dial. But before he could act, the voice continued, predicting a future none of us wanted to face. It foretold accidents on the road, encounters with eerie strangers, and horrors that awaited us in the shadows. Panic washed over us, and Mike tried to change the radio station, but the voice persisted, its words weaving a chilling tapestry of our impending doom. The road stretched on, the desert landscape seemingly endless, as the voice on the radio grew more malevolent with each passing mile. It taunted us, mocked our attempts to escape its clutches, and revealed terrifying details about our present and future. As we continued driving, the predictions of the voice began to come true. An accident ahead blocked our path, forcing us to take an unfamiliar detour through the desolate desert. Along the way, we encountered eerie strangers who seemed to appear out of nowhere, their eyes gleaming with an unsettling knowledge. Sarah, in particular, was tormented by the voice's prophecies. It had revealed her fear of the dark, and now, as night fell and the desert became a sea of shadows, her unease grew into full-blown terror. She clung to my arm, her eyes darting nervously at every passing shadow. The voice on the radio continued its relentless assault, its words becoming more cryptic and ominous. It spoke of a forsaken place hidden in the desert, a place where our fate would be sealed. It urged us to find it, to confront the horrors that awaited us there. As the night wore on, we grew increasingly paranoid and fearful. The once familiar desert had become a labyrinth of dread, and the vintage radio had become our tormentor. We couldn't turn it off, every attempt to silence it only made the voice grow louder and more insistent. Desperation set in as we realized that we were trapped in a nightmarish prophecy, a nightmare from which there seemed to be no escape. Our bonds of friendship, once unbreakable, began to fray as paranoia gnawed at our sanity. Sarah's fear of the dark became a living nightmare as the voice's predictions came true one by one. Shadows seemed to take on a life of their own, creeping closer with each passing moment. It was as if the darkness itself had become a malevolent force, tormenting her relentlessly. But the worst was yet to come. The voice on the radio guided us to a forsaken place in the heart of the desert, a desolate expanse of barren land marked only by a crumbling, decrepit structure. The voice promised that our fate awaited us there, that we would find answers to the mysteries that had plagued us throughout the night. Reluctantly, we left the safety of the truck and ventured into the darkness. The moon cast an eerie glow over the abandoned structure, revealing a place that seemed to defy time itself. The voice urged us onward, promising that our questions would be answered within those decaying walls. Inside, we discovered a room filled with ancient relics and cryptic symbols etched into the walls. It was as if we had stepped into a place untouched by time, a place where the past and present converged in a nightmarish tableau. And then, in the center of the room, we found it, a vintage radio, identical to the one in my truck, emitting the same disembodied voice. It was as if the radio itself was a conduit for the malevolent force that had haunted us throughout the night. As we stared at the radio in horror, the voice on the other end revealed its true nature. It was not a mere transmission but a sentient entity, a dark force that fed on our fears and despair. It had drawn us into its web of torment, luring us into the forsaken place to seal our fate. Desperation and fear surged through us as we realized that there was no escaping the entity's clutches. It had ensnared us in a nightmarish prophecy, a twisted game from which there was no reprieve. But then, in a moment of clarity, I remembered something. The vintage radio in my truck had an off switch. With trembling hands, I reached for the radio in the abandoned room and flipped the switch. Silence enveloped us, broken only by the sound of our ragged breathing. The entity, deprived of its conduit, had been silenced, its malevolent influence extinguished. We stumbled out of the forsaken place, our bond as friends stronger than ever. The nightmarish ordeal had tested us in ways we could never have imagined, but we had emerged from it intact, our lives no longer dictated by the sinister voice on the radio. As we drove away from that accursed place, the desert landscape stretched out before us once more, bathed in the soft glow of the moon. The vintage radio in my truck remained silent, its voice silenced forever, and we were free to continue our journey into the unknown, our friendship and resilience serving as our guiding light through the darkest of nights. Now, before we come back with brand new episodes for you, do subscribe to our channel Horror Talker. And share it with your friends and family. Stay awake and stay alert, because you never know.